Hello and welcome to the training on the new billing process for state SLS for the resource exchange. My name is Troy and I'll be walking y'all through how to do this new billing that we've come up with. So to begin with, there's going to be a form that you'll get a link to, and this form will be the first step in going through the billing process. So go ahead and click on this link and it'll pull up the form and we'll get started. So like I said, this is the PASA billing for state SLS for the resource exchange. The first thing to note is this note right here. You can bill up to 5 services for one individual at a time. Now you can only bill for one individual per form that you fill out, but you can have 5 different services that you provided on that form. So this is kind of the basics of the form. I'll walk through each of the questions on one that I have previously filled out so you can see what it looks like filled out. But this is what the form will look like when you first pull it up. An important thing to note is that questions 13 or any question that says, do you provide another service? If you click no, then you're good to submit. If you click yes, it will make it so that there are more questions up until you hit the 5th service. So I'll show you what I mean in a moment. So we're going to jump back over to the form then that I have already filled out. So we're going to do this for a mock client test ignore. The second question is individual identifier. So we're using the social security number for this, and the thing that's really important, and it says it right here, is include the dashes in the person's social security number. It's just the way we have things organized, and so it won't register that person's social security number if it doesn't have the dashes. So that's a really important note to just make sure that you are putting in the dashes. Date of birth for this person, you can fill in that person's date of birth. The next thing that is needing a little bit of explaining is the PASA name. So whatever the name of the organization is that you're working for needs to be entered here. However, it needs to be entered in a specific way. That specific way is on this document that Laura Thomas should have sent to you or to one of your supervisors, and it lists out all of the different provider names. Now, you don't have to write it out completely like you would need it. You don't need to include like LLC or MT-BC if you're looking at either of these two right here. But let me go down to the resource exchange and show you and give you an example of what might be helpful. So for the resource exchange, we have the resource exchange space parenthesis TRE. So if I'm working for the resource exchange and I'm submitting a billing, then that means that I can use the resource exchange or just TRE. So there's no other provider that has TRE in its name, so I can use that. However, if I were to just put the, it would try and pull every single different provider that had the word the in their title. So you want to use something that's going to differentiate you from other providers. The other thing to note is that if you're an organization that has multiple locations, say for example, Mosaic is a great example of this. Mosaic has a couple of different locations, as you can see right here. Now Mosaic will be billing for most likely Mosaic-Colorado Springs. And so if you're working for Mosaic in the Colorado Springs location, you'll want to put into this PASA line, Mosaic-Colorado Springs. That's just so that it can differentiate. But for the purposes of this training, I'm still going to be from the resource exchange. But that document is something that you want to look at before you finish submitting the form. Just go back and make sure that your name is spelled correctly and it matches up with this list. Next is the email for proof your invoice was received. This is an email that you'll then be receiving all of the updates from your billing process. So again, make sure that that is spelled properly as well. Next is the service description, and this one you don't have to worry about spelling or anything like that because it's all a drop down. So you can drop it down and scroll through. Unfortunately, it does not work to have a typing search function. So if I were to want to try and say do Homemaker Basic, I can't type in there and have it pop up with Homemaker. I would need to actually scroll down and find Homemaker Basic and click on that. However, I'm not going to bill for Homemaker Basic. We're going to do Acquiring Emergency Food Assistance. Retainer payment. So this is something that's special with coronavirus. So this won't be here after July's billing is done. So when you come back to this form in August, you won't see any of these questions. This is specifically for during coronavirus for providers to be able to back bill. What month did services take place? Pretty straightforward. If I'm billing for July and that's when services took place, I should put July in there. Date of services, first and last date of services. It's important that you use the notation that is mentioned in the question. So 2 digits for month, 2 digits for the day, and the 4 digits for the year. As you can see here, even though it's July 7th, and that's normally how people would write it, we want to have in that extra 0. It just makes it easier on our end and for the flow to process everything. Same thing with last date of service. Now, the next thing is units, and units are different than total amount, although they don't look it here. But units are the units that you're billing for according to the state. So if it's something like Homemaker Basic, 1 unit is equivalent to 15 minutes. However, since we're billing for acquiring emergency food assistance, 1 unit is equal to $1. So the total amount would be the dollar amount. And these two will be different depending on what service you are providing. And you'll see an example of that in a moment. Did you provide another service for this individual? Again, I clicked no, I could submit. But since I'm clicking yes, it's going to allow us to see the second set of questions. So again, chose a different service, retainer payment, all of these are going to be the same questions. But here is the example of the units and the dollar amount being different. So it's just super important that you note that because again, the rate for this particular service for what is it, behavioral plan assessment is $25.54 per unit or thereabouts. And so 3 units actually comes out to $76.62 in terms of dollar amount. So that total amount, again, that's going to be your dollar amount that you're actually billing for. The units is going to be the units according to the state. And then if we click yes here, it will come up with the third drop down, and we can keep going and keep going. And if we click yes, all the way down to the 5th service. So after the 5th service, you'll notice that there's no longer did you provide a 6th service. It is only up to 5 services per an individual, like I said at the beginning. So we're going to pretend that I submitted for this service. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. And let's say I clicked submit. I'm not going to because it'll take about 10 minutes to run, but let's say I did. And at some point, I would receive a couple of different emails, hopefully just one saying that I did everything properly. But let's say I overbilled on a specific service. So we're looking at dental major, and we overbilled on dental major. And so you'll get this email that says, hello, the name of your provider agency. You're receiving this email because it looks like the dollar amount that you have billed for exceeds the for the service exceeds the dollar amount that was approved as of our most up-to-date service plan. Please correspond with, in this case, I'm the service coordinator, Troy Cook. Whoever the service coordinator might be, their name will pull up here, and their name will also be in this to box. And then Callie Tolbert, she will be CC'd on all of these because she's the supervisor of the state SLS program. So this gives you an opportunity to talk with the service coordinator and possibly the supervisor if you need to, if you see that there is a unit amount that is billed that you don't think is correct in terms of you being overbilled. Now, the email that you want to receive looks like this. It's a bit of a long email, but it contains all of the important information in regards to the billing process. So on this first line, it greets you and it shows you all the services that you billed for. Now, these are not the approved services. That's the second line. This line, specifically after it says service has been approved through phase 1 of billing, these are the services that you've been approved to move on to phase 2 for. So as you can see, there's dental major up here, but there isn't down here because of that other email we received. That other email notes that the billing for that service has stopped. This next line is pretty important when it comes to phase 2, so just look at it and it'll mention it again down at the bottom. But your invoice number for log note documents is 10. What that means is that the invoice number is 10, and that's going to need to be included later when you enter into phase 2 of billing. Now, the next 3 lines are caveats as to other things, as to things that may have gone wrong with the billing process, as well as who you can reach out to for help. So, if there's a difference between the services you billed for and the ones that made it through phase 1, you should have received an email which services could not be billed properly if it was an issue with billing too much. Here are the amounts that you've billed for each of the services listed above, and it lists the dollar amounts for each service that was billed above. If you didn't get an email, that means that it can be one of 2 things, and that's what this next section of the email kind of explains. It could be a mismatching of the time the services were provided. So let's say that this service plan that we're working on for test ignore is approved from July 1st through June 30th of 2021. And we're going to try and bill right now for things that are back in May of 2020. You wouldn't be able to do that because it's outside of the approved parameters of the service that was provided in that particular service plan. If you need to bill for a service plan that is not currently active, that is when you should reach out to the service coordinator and the Cali Tolbert to see what you can do about that. So it says, please double check these dates because they'll go against the start of the service plan to make sure that those dates are accurate. The other thing that might happen, and because we're human, we all make mistakes, is maybe you bill the wrong service for the wrong person, right? You're trying to get all the billing through. It's the end of the month or the beginning of the month, and you're trying to get all of the billing through before that 5th of the month deadline, and you happen to bill the wrong services for the wrong individual. So then it was ask you to please check again with the approved service plan, make sure those services are approved, and then if you still have issues from there, that's when you should reach out to the service coordinator. So as you can see, it says, please check again with the approved service plan, and if that is showing that you are billing for the proper services, then reach out to the service coordinator for test ignore, Troy Cook at that email. Right, and so this will change depending on who the service coordinator is. This next line is the big caveat with all of this. If you continue to run into issues, if you continue to run into, hey, this flow has failed, hey, this flow has failed, hey, this flow has failed, and by flow, I mean the back-end process that is processing all this information. Sorry, I used different language there. But hey, this billing has failed, that's when you should reach out to me. So I am the one that has kind of built this system and is helping run it. So if you keep running into issues, please reach out to me, but only do this if it is after the 2nd or 3rd submission and you know that all of your information that you have is right. Other than that, try and talk with the service coordinator, try and talk with your internal departments, make sure that you have the proper information, because there's a lot of people and there are a lot of services, and if everyone's emailing me, that means that I'm not going to get to anyone's information or answer anyone's questions as quickly as I would like to and as quickly as you would like me to. This last part is about phase 2 of billing. It says, if you are ready to move to phase 2 of billing, please respond to this email and attach documents for justifying each service provided. Please have a separate document, this is important, have a separate document for each service that you are billing for. And the format of the document's name should be the following. Should be the person's name, so for this case, test ignore, the invoice number, 10 for us, the name of the service as it is spelled at the beginning of this email. Now, I know this seems really picky, but please, please, please pay attention to this. It must be, the name of the service must be the same as the names that appear right here. Okay? They must be the same. Otherwise, it's not going to work and you're going to get a bunch of errors and you're going to be like, why? I spelled it the same. If you didn't spell it exactly the same, it will throw back an error at you. So please, please, please make sure you're looking at that and making sure things are spelled properly. Okay, it says it right there too. And then the last thing will be the provider's name, and it should be this exact same name. So we want it to be this name that appears down here, or this name that appears up here at the top. Great thing for this, copy, right? Right click, copy, Control C, however you want to do it. So let's walk through renaming a document so that it's in the proper format. So I'm going to open up my File Explorer, and let's say this is my log note document for tests, and it's for the support community connections. So I'm going to rename this, and what's the first thing that needs to come up? Well, the first thing is the person's name. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that I get rid of this section and have the person's name. The next thing that needs to come up is our billing invoice number. So what's our billing invoice number? We'll go back to this email. 10. Okay, so let's put that 10 there. And I'm not meaning to be patronizing. I just really want everyone to understand this because this is super important. So 10. Next is the name of the service spelled exactly as it is in the email. So I'm going to get rid of that and come back to the email. And it says supported community connections. And if you look, I had support community connections. I didn't have the supported, and so it wouldn't have worked. So I'm going to copy that, come back to this, right click, so I can rename. And then last is the name of your providing agency. So go ahead and minimize this again. And we'll highlight the name that is up here. Again, copy. Control C, right click, copy, however you want to do it. I'll hit rename. Control V or right click paste. Now, if we look at this name, we'll see that there's an extra space and a comma at the end. So we want to make sure we get rid of that. Again, we want it to match exactly as it does in the email. So I see that it now matches. Everything's good to go. Then I would go back to that email, click reply, and there we go. Now, let's say that I sent this out. The email that I would receive, if I had sent that email, I would receive an email that looks like this. So as you can see, I already did it for these two different services. So it shows that these are the services that are approved for billing. So these services are good to go. They're good to start being billed. And then there's this next line. If you know that a document was sent for a service that was provided but is not listed above, please double check the spelling of that document's title and resubmit. Please refer back to the first email you got for how the document should be named and specifically pay attention to the name of the service. Again, I'm going to drive home that point. The service and the provider name must match exactly what is in the first email you receive. Otherwise, the phase 2 of billing will not process as it needs to be. So please, please, please make sure you're naming those documents properly. Next one is a caveat on our side. It says if TRE determines there is an issue with the documentation or invoice submitted, then billing may be subject to further review and recoupment if needed. What this means is that if a provider is to submit something to us, the resource exchange, and we then look at that documentation and see that it's blank or it doesn't provide notes saying that a service was provided for an individual, we can then follow up with that provider and stop the billing process. If we need to, if the provider can't provide proof that the service was provided or there's something happens where we now know the service wasn't provided for the individual, then we can say that we can recoup and receive back the money that was paid out to that provider. If you have issues, again, if you're submitting it, if you keep submitting it and keep submitting it and you keep running into issues, and it's after the third time, please reach out to me. After the third time, though. If you run into issues on the first time and the second time, do it one more time just for good measure. Again, double check those document names and then try submitting. All you have to do to resubmit is send the email again. Send the email back to statesls@tre.org. But that's super important. Again, those document names, I cannot say it enough. Those document names need to match. I will be doing a question and answer session at some point on Wednesday the 29th or Thursday the 30th. And so if you all have questions, please feel free to reach out to me and join that Q&A session. Hopefully I can answer as many questions as possible before we actually start submitting billing. Thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great day.